If you are not using seller credits when you are buying or selling real estate, you are missing out on so many real estate opportunities. Okay, welcome back to another video. I'm sorry it's been a while since I've uploaded. As you can see, I am in a new office. We have moved to a different part of Winnipeg, and now I'm in this glorious basement office. The house still needs to be renovated yet in the future, and so until then, this is the space we're working with. So today what I wanted to talk about with you guys was one of the best negotiation tactics or strategies that I have used with numerous clients of mine to get them into properties or out of properties when they're the buyer or the seller that they normally wouldn't have been able to transact. Okay, and this is called seller credits. And what seller credits are is on possession date, the seller will give a credit or like cash to the buyer for the specified amount written in the contract. And to kind of explain how this works, I've got two different scenarios, one with a buyer and one with a seller, to show how you can utilize seller credits in both scenarios to make both parties happy and allow both parties to get the transaction completed. Okay, so scenario one, you are a buyer, you're looking at a $300,000 house. It needs about 20K of work in the kitchen to make it up to your standard. You're having trouble finding other houses, but this one would work. You are gonna put down 20%, but you only have $60,000 available to use for that down payment, which would be the full 20%, right? So now you're in a situation where you like this house, but it needs 20K of work to fix the kitchen, but you don't have enough money or reserves to be able to buy the house and get the work done. It's not a situation where you could put less down and then keep the money because you were only pre-approved at this certain percentage for that purchase price, okay? So normally you could maybe put down 10%, keep the extra 30K and use that to put down towards the work, but the bank probably didn't approve you for 10% down on a $300,000 house. So in this scenario, what you could do is you could say, okay, I only have 60K available. So if I minus that 20K from my down payment that is needed for the renovation, that gives me $40,000. That would be an offer price of $200,000. Most sellers aren't going to take a $100,000 pay cut to their property to sell it, unless it's a super desperate situation. But even then, it's very uncommon. Like that's a 33% cut to the listing price, which would be an astronomical deal if you could do that. And so that's very unlikely. And we're not going to consider closing costs or land transfer tax in this scenario because we just want to do basic math. So instead of offering $200,000 to do the necessary repairs, you could offer $300,000 but ask for $20,000 as a seller credit. So the seller would net $280,000 for their home, and you would use 60K to buy the $300,000 property and then get 20K on possession date from the seller that you could use for the repairs. So in this situation, the seller only takes a 20K pay cut, which makes sense because that's how much work needs to be done in the kitchen. And you end up getting the property that you want and being able to do the repairs at the amount that you were pre-approved for. The beauty of this is that it's very different than offering $280,000, which is 20K off the purchase price, because then your down payment would still be $56,000. And this is where seller credits is very different because in a real estate transaction, you're normally using up like 80 to up to 95% leveraged money from a bank. And so because your cash might be a limiting factor, you can use seller credits to give you back more cash, right? Because a 20K pay cut off a list price is not the same as getting 20K in cash. Because in this scenario, you're loaning 80%. And so it only gives you $4,000 back, right? Which is actually not that much. You couldn't do the kitchen renovation that you wanted to. So now on the selling side, you can use seller credits to get a hesitant buyer to push them over the edge into purchasing the property. Okay, so in the exact same scenario, we're gonna say it's a $300,000 house, but now you're the seller and the buyer that's approached you only has enough money for the 5% down payment as well as an additional $5,000. However, they've been pre-approved for $400,000, which would be a 5% down payment using that $20,000 that they have. So they want to do the kitchen, but they don't need to do it as nicely. They think they could do the renovation for $10,000, but with their current money, if they bought your place at $300,000, they would be short $5,000. Okay, so now this is where for that deal to work for them, they would have to offer 275. Now that's a $25,000 pay cut. As a seller, you don't want to do that, right? Or what you could do as the seller is say, okay, you could buy this place for $305,000, which is only $5,000 more dollars added to their mortgage, which they're fine because they're pre-approved up to $400,000, but give them a $5,000 credit on possession day. So this would allow this buyer to put down 5%, which would be roughly $15K. It'd be a little more because they have the extra $5,000. In addition to, they have the extra $5,000 for the kitchen renovation from their own money, and then $5,000 coming from you, the seller, which gives them the $10K needed to do the kitchen renovations they want. And it nets you the same $300,000 that you would need to be happy with for the sale of your home, right? So in this scenario, both parties are happy. One party gets the money they need to do the renovations. The other party gets the purchase price they want, or the net purchase price they want. And I will say, as a note, you do have to be careful with seller credits because you're dealing with cash, and changing the mortgage amount, your mortgage will increase or decrease depending on the purchase price, but not necessarily depending on the seller credits. And so because of that, you don't want to just buy a place that's way more money and then ask for a bunch of credits in return, because then you're just paying a higher mortgage payment, and most banks don't want you to do that. I mean, you can, but most people aren't going to take that. Now, where things get really sticky in these seller credit situations is when you're doing inspections or have gotten an inspection report as the buyer, and there's something that comes up, or maybe a bunch of things. And then you can amend the offer, approaching the seller or the listing agent, I guess in this case, and saying, listen, here's all the repairs that need to be done. Instead of backing out of the offer, we're going to ask for $10,000 in seller credits. So then you would amend the offer, having the same purchase price, but you would, instead of lowering the price by 10K, you would get the 10K to fix the problems you need. Now, instead of lowering the purchase price, you ask for the cash because maybe you are a little bit handy. You could do some of the repairs yourself, or some of them maybe don't need to be done right away and you'd rather have the money than have the lower purchase price. Or you might be able to find cheaper contractors. Maybe you got a friend who's an electrician, a plumber, a contractor, whatever. You can find somebody who would do it for cheaper rather than asking the seller to have the work done before you buy the place, not ensuring the quality or any other thing that's going on, because the seller knows, I'm getting rid of this property. Maybe I could just hire somebody who will do really cheap work and then it's fine for me, right? So you'd rather take the cash and have the work done yourself than make the seller pay for it, okay? The important thing there is that you have an accurate estimate at how much money it would take, because you don't want to say ask for $10,000 and the work that's needed is 40K, right? Because then you're in a pickle where you have a bunch of work that needs to be done, but you don't have enough funds to be able to do it. And so if you have any questions about seller credits or how this works, or how come nobody ever talks about this, and to be honest, it's even most realtors don't know about this because it's a little more complicated than just a general offer to purchase. And so because of that, I find that as the agent, I often have to explain it to the listing or the buyer agent, which depends on which one I am, about how a seller credit works. But with that said, I have done it a number of times with my clients here in Winnipeg so that they can get into the property they want, having the amount of cash or reserves that they still want to be able to have at the end of the day.